All right, welcome everyone. Today we have two special guests. We're going to be talking about self-directed retirement accounts, and we have Matt and Joe from CamaPlan. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So yeah, tell us a little bit about your company and what you do.
I'm going to let age go before beauty on this one. So just a little bit of background about me before I turn it over to Joe is I joined CamaPlan in September of 24. Joe's been with the company longer, he has more institutional knowledge, so he'll be able to give the best background about CamaPlan and so forth.
Yeah, we've been around for 20 years. We just passed our 20th anniversary in August. We are based in Bluebell, Pennsylvania, but we have clients all over the country, 8,500 of them plus, and about 1.1 billion in assets under management. The company was founded by a brother and sister team. The brother is a former rocket scientist, an engineer by trade, who worked for NASA on the space shuttle program. The other founder has extensive experience in Fortune 100 IT and has developed all of our systems platforms. We probably fit right in the middle in terms of size for all the companies that are in our business. So we're big enough to get anything done that our clients need to get done, but we're small enough to answer the phone. So that's one of our pride points is that you get personalized service. People deal with myself, or they deal with Matt or Courtney, and a couple of other people behind the scenes. So
Okay.
The both the owners, Carl and Maggie, since they are, they hold portfolios themselves, they're third generation real estate
mhm.
investors. They deal with a lot of financial services folks in their day-to-day lives. And what, just to be perfectly blunt, they know what they like, they know what they don't like. And so they've
Mhm.
really tried to create a company that they would want to deal with themselves from a customer service standpoint.
Yeah, they like to say that the company was created by investors for investors, and
Exactly.
and and they, after 20 years, are involved daily in the operation of the company. They're not standoff owners. They're involved and they're running the show.
Okay, yeah, that's good to know because one of the biggest struggles I've had hasn't been deploying money. Deploying money, I mean, has not been the easiest if you have a non-checkbook control account, but then receiving the money and making sure it goes to the right places. Um, So yeah, that's just one of the biggest pain points I've had. Another pain point I've had is also customer service. So it's good to hear that you can actually get on the phone with someone and talk to someone who actually knows what they're talking about versus, you know, uh, just a rep who's just there to be a body.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a pretty crucial part, at least until it's a very crucial part of the business plan, and until some, 12-year-old comes and creates a blockchain solution that makes everything super smooth and no one needs to talk to each other, it can be a clunky process. And the other thing, as I'm sure you, John, face in your day to day, is that people don't know about self-direction. They don't know about,
Mhm.
what a fully self-directed account is and how to use it. So there's a lot of hand holding that needs to go on, not only with the client, but with their client CPA or with their tax attorney, whoever, about how all these things are going to work. And we have those conversations with not just the client, but sort of the client's financial team to make sure that the decisions that are being made about using a self-directed IRA, for example, to buy a piece of real estate or to lend from, everyone is being informed about how exactly the process will work and what kind of tax liability, if any, there will be.
Yeah, that's really helpful because at the end of last year, a lot of people started flooding me with messages about, okay, well, now I've lent this money. What kind of tax implications do I have for the following year? So can you talk a little bit about that if you're just purely lending?
Sure. Joe, you want to jump into that
yeah,
one?
yeah. If you're just purely lending, there are no tax implications as long as you're not engaging in self-dealing. In other words, you're not lending to a prohibited party. You're not lending to yourself. We have a lot of fix and flippers who say, "Can I use my IRA to do my fix and flips?" And no, you can't. And as long as the funds that are repaid come back to the IRA, it's a closed loop. There's no tax implications. If you're engaged in borrowing money, there could be UDFI issues. There are for IRAs, not so much for 401ks. But in terms of just strictly lending, I do a lot of that out of my IRA and 401k, and there's no tax implications.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's just like any other retirement account. It's just you get to tell that money where to go, right?
Pretty much.
Mm.
Exactly. And I think people start hearing about unrelated business income tax. They start hearing this thing called UBIT or
Mhm.
UBISH or so. I've
Yeah.
heard different names, and so people say, "What is that?" And it's definitely something that needs to be, looked into and understood, which we're happy to explain how it all works. But that's really for equity plays. For
Mhm.
debt plays, there's not going to be any of that. And, without, without making any endorsement of any kind of or giving any kind of financial advice, because we are Switzerland in this case.
Mhm.
Um, I always feel like, in terms of sort of jumping into using a self-directed IRA or using qualified money, um, you're doing debt, whether you're participating fractionally in a loan, or you're just making a loan. It's sort of the most straightforward way to invest, using qualified funds, because usually the loan is kind of speaks for itself in terms of what you're lending against, but
Mhm.
also the tax liability is non-existent when you're using qualified funds. But also, it's really, really clear to see what you're saving, because you're using an IRA as opposed to doing it from regular taxable income.
Mm.
Yeah, that was one of the questions. I mean, I didn't even know about when I first started using self-directed was, okay, the UBIT tax. Then I started scrambling, okay, then how do I make sure that if I invest in this RV park or something, am I going to get hit with an extra tax that I had nothing about? And so can you explain a little bit about what qualifies or what's going to cause you to be responsible for UBIT?
Yeah, I think the first thing that you can do to avoid it is to talk to the sponsor of the investment. They should know this. They should be able to tell you, yes, there's UBIT. When I issue your K1, there's a line out, and I can't remember the number of the line on that form, but it lists there's codes for UBIT, uh, for uh, for UBIT income, and that amount is there. The dirt simple version of it is if you invested in a mobile home park and they put a vending machine on there and started selling Coke, uh, and you were getting a share of that income, that would be engaging in a business as opposed to a passive investment. So probably the other example that I'm aware of that's simple enough to understand quickly is a self-storage facility that begins vending and selling moving supplies and renting out dollies and things like that. And if you got a portion of that income, that's likely to show up. But the best way to avoid getting surprised like that is to ask the sponsor.
And the
Okay.
other
Yeah.
consideration would be on, sorry if I missed this, but it is if the property is using leverage to
Mm,
to make improvements or something like that. So that's unrelated debt finance income. So, um, if at basic kind of like zoom out, the IRS views these as, retirement vehicles, these IRAs, and they're already giving you, some tax advantages to reach your retirement goals so that you're secured when you're in retirement age, financially secured. So if you start doing things that look like you're running a business out of your self-directed IRA, sort of what to the examples that Joe mentioned, then they're gonna want their piece of that pie, because this is no longer becoming like a retirement vehicle. You're trying to run a business. Similarly, unrelated debt finance income is a part of UBIT, so it's folded under there, and it if a property takes if a project is using leverage, if leverage is being used either to acquire the property, or if you have a construction loan and you're going to, buy the property and make improvements to it, then you're using a loan, and your retirement account is benefiting from that loan. So that will come into play too. And when we work with investment sponsors who are syndicating deals and they're taking a loan, their investors are most likely going to be affected by this unrelated debt finance income. So it can happen in that case. And the best way to understand what the actual liability will be goes back to what Joe said is, okay, how does this investment actually work? And what's the size of their loan? How am I going to be hit with it? So but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to like blow up your retirement account. It just means that your returns might be less than what are projected that you're projecting or what are projected in the materials of that investment sponsor has provided. So it's just about understanding the investment, talking to someone who knows what how it works. That's like getting CamaPlan and your CPA on a call, and understanding, okay, so instead of a you know I don't know, a 22% return that I'm expecting on this equity deal, maybe it's going to be reduced down to 18 or 15% because I am going to have to pay some tax on the unrelated debt finance income tax.
Got it. So, I mean, things can get pretty complicated pretty quickly, is what you're
Yeah,
saying.
it can get complicated. And I don't want to make it scary because people go into these deals and they're going into like equity deals to be passive investors because they don't want to be
Mhm.
the landlord. They don't want to have to fix the toilet or deal with rent rolls and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So then if you are using qualified funds and we start throwing out these acronyms and
Mhm.
all these complicated things, it's like, well, I want to be passive. This is getting very, very complicated.
Yeah.
I think it just takes having to get your feet wet a little bit to understand it, but it becomes relatively straightforward after a little bit of learning. So I don't want to make it seem any like scarier than it needs to be. But let's say you're like, I don't want to deal with any of that. Well, that actually goes back to my earlier comment about the straightforwardness of doing debt.
Mhm.
Because if you say, hey, I don't want to make a mistake. If you're doing something that's just purely a debt play, then you're not going to have to worry about those things. And what we see a lot of investors do, specifically we see investors who are participating in like syndications, uh, as well as investment sponsors who are offering syndications, is they understand the sort of strategy that investors are or limited partners are trying to play.
Mhm.
So they'll have their equity deal, but they'll also have a debt fund. And really, the debt fund is set up so that the same investor can participate in the syndication through regular W-2 taxable income. And then they have the debt deal or the debt fund, and that investor can then participate in the fund through qualified monies, i.e., self-directed IRA.
Yeah, that was something that I had learned, I think December of last year was like, you can negotiate whatever you want. Like, you don't have to go in as an equity partner. You can say, like, if you're bringing enough money, they'll do anything for
Sure.
you, right?
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, understand the product that you're going to invest in and talk to the sponsor, ask them the questions. We have seen a lot of sponsors that offer product that really doesn't fit into the IRA at all. There are such significant depreciation and tax
Mhm.
breaks that can't be realized inside of an IRA that are really not suitable for IRAs. So again, it's just knowing what you're investing in. This is self-direction, so you have to do a little bit of homework yourself. But
Right.
just asking the sponsor, how do you handle this? I have an IRA. How's this going to affect me? And they should have answers. If they give you a dumb dog look, maybe it's not a suitable sponsor or suitable operator for you.
Yep. You can participate in so many deals through self-directed IRAs, and that really speaks to the control that you have. But the other part of that coin, it is up to you. It's up to you to make those decisions. Um, if you look at investments like energy investments, specifically direct interests in in oil deals, those generally don't make sense for self-direction because the benefit of those is the depreciation you'll get on at least the initial years of those investments.
Mhm.
Well, that's only depreciation that can be assessed if you're using regular taxable income. You don't get to see any of that through a self-directed IRA. And so it's just understanding simple things like that, like what makes the most sense for qualified funds versus how am I going to use non-qualified funds for other kinds of deals.
And I guess it's one of those scenarios where, I mean, do they? Do the people that are doing the oil and gas, do they offer the same type of structure where you can be an owner or you could just have a debt product associated with that?
Um, what
Have you seen
I've
that?
what I've seen is something like that is they have, and actually we have a partner who does something a little bit different, but and is I'm thinking of someone we've worked with, Joe, and you might know a little bit more about it specifically with like mineral rights and how
All right.
they position it, but a separate structure I've seen is just having ownership in the company itself. So, which
Mm,
is, that's private equity and that comes with its own risks. But in terms of being something that would make more sense to do through a self-directed IRA, that is an offering that I can think of at least one energy company has created. I think that's an exception. I don't think that's very, very common,
yeah.
but it's something that I've seen pop up there.
Yeah, some sponsors will create products specifically for IRAs. They'll have what they call UBIT blockers in there, and things that make it more favorable for IRA. But again, the kind of things that Matt's talking about are front loaded with depreciation and tax breaks, and just you don't get all those. The reason for going into those is because you've got other things going on in your portfolio, and you can use those tax breaks and that depreciation. So
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest challenges I've seen is that people will put a lot of time and effort into evaluating different opportunities, but you're not realizing you're not able to use any of that cash now. So why not just simplify it? Do something like these debt products, lend privately on something that you understand, and then just get it moving that way versus trying to evaluate all these different things and all these different opportunities.
Well, we don't want to discourage anyone from doing their due diligence. So
Yeah,
I'd
yeah.
say the more information you're collecting, the better. But what you're getting at in terms of sort of the timing of when you can access funds, I do think that's a very essential uh, part or consideration of the strategy, especially when you're looking at some, let's say it's a like a campground deal or a recreational site deal that has a 10-year timeline. Well, that can be pretty daunting for someone who wants to see their money back in a few years.
Mhm.
But if there's it's a 10-year timeline and there's capital events obviously spread out through that timeline, and you're not going to be touching the money anyway, and you're not really satisfied with how the returns you're going to get in your Fidelity 401k or whatever that is, understanding the timing of when you can access that money does play a really great part into how you should be thinking about the kinds of deals that make sense for you and your self-directed IRA.
And picking something where you know how to evaluate it. Like I've seen a lot of people just say come and say, I have no idea what to look for in this, but I want to get involved. Well, you should probably learn before you
absolutely.
before you get into it.
Absolutely. I mean, this is with any kind of investing. You want to assess your risk tolerance, and then you want to know what you're investing in, kind of understand the dynamics. I do a lot of simple stuff. It's lending for fix and flips where there's a promissory note and a mortgage and a
Mhm.
lien, and it's all pretty much straightforward. And there's not a lot that can happen in there, as opposed to some of these, private placements with waterfall returns over a
Mhm.
period of 5 or 7 years that are very complicated. I'm learning about those too, but stick with what you know. That's the whole thing about self-direction is you can apply if you coming at this thing from a particular angle, you know real estate already, or you're a finance person, you can use what you know to invest in what you're comfortable with.
Yeah. Especially with single family homes, fix and flips, it's very easy to evaluate whether it's a good deal or not. And
Yeah,
you don't want to be spending a ton of time just evaluating something if you could be better using your time better to do something else. Um, but yeah, so I guess what is what is the process to get started if I want to open up a self-directed retirement account?
Yeah, we try to make it as easy as possible. So we basically boil it down to three simple steps. So the first step is that you're going to open your account with CamaPlan. You'll go onto our website. It takes about 15 minutes. It's adjacent to kind of just opening up an online account, with any sort of like financial firm. But it's really, really fast. So then the next step is to actually fund your account. Most people, when they are going to open up their self-directed IRA account, they already have a deal in mind, whether it's going to be buying a piece of real estate, purchasing some gold, or participating in a real estate syndication. They already know what the deal is and they know what their investment amount's going to be. So now it's time to fund their account since they've opened it. Usually that's going to take place through a transfer or through a rollover. So the transfer is going from like account to like account. What that means is if you have a Roth IRA sitting over at Schwab and it's just, it's in mutual funds, et cetera, and you're going to call it 75K into this real estate syndication, you know that you're going to pull off a chunk from that Roth IRA at Schwab. You open up a Roth IRA at CamaPlan, and you're going to make the transfer over. Because it's a transfer, CamaPlan initiates that process with Schwab in this case, and the money comes over. Usually, if everything's above board and everyone's playing nice and on top of their game, it usually takes between, I'm going to say, 5 to 10 business days. Um, if you are using a different kind of account, so the common example is an old 401k or a 401k you now have access to, and you're going to put it into maybe a health savings account that you've opened with CamaPlan. You're going from uh, account type A to account type B. That's going to be a rollover. So you, as the client, will actually initiate that process with your existing custodian, and they're going to have you sign some paperwork. Once everything is above board, they'll send the money over to CamaPlan. Because of that process, it usually takes about 2 weeks, we like to quote. And that's just the custodian. They're just doing their job. They're trying to make sure that they're sending your money to the right place. But we don't have any control over that. So it takes about 2 weeks. But in either case, those are kind of the most two common ways that people are going to fund their account. Um, once the money is in your CamaPlan account, you go through the process of completing an asset purchase directive for the investment that you're going to make. So whether that's going to be, buying the piece of real estate or participating in a syndication, for example, you'll have that document, and then there will be the supporting documents that go along with that transaction. So, um, with buying a piece of real estate, obviously you would need kind of all the sort of standard documents that would go along with that transaction. If you're doing something like a syndication, you would need the private placement memorandum or subscription agreement initialed. Um, the purchase agreement would come to us, to our operations team that you filled out. We're initialed. We complete it on your behalf since we're now the signatory on your behalf of the account. And then the money would get sent over so that's step two. And then the money would get sent over to the investment sponsor or to complete the real estate acquisition. And the money would be effectively deployed. The investment is going to be titled to your self-directed IRA. So if we're using you as an example, John Chen, it would say CamaPlan FBO John Chan as the holder of that investment, because it's your IRA that's holding it. It's not you personally. And then anytime there's like distributions or anything like that, or any kind of um, money needs to move to pay a contractor or something to make improvements to the piece of property, that all happens from your IRA to the recipient of that money. And conversely, if you're receiving rent or you're receiving a dividend from a syndication, that money goes to your self-directed IRA.
So if you pay for work that's getting done, do they have to submit an invoice? Does the contractor have to submit an invoice?
How does that process work, Joe? I'm less familiar
Yeah.
with it.
Yeah, there's a couple things. Everything, as Matt pointed out, operates within the IRA. So
Mm.
you would uh, get bills like a gas bill or a water bill or a tax bill or an invoice from a contractor would be submitted to us, to the IRA. You'd be notified that a payment was requested, and you would authorize those payments with
Mhm.
things like gas bills and water bills. We can set up recurring payments so that you're simply notified that of the amount and that it was paid, so you can kind of monitor it. But yeah, if you're in a business of direct ownership of rental property, unless you're doing all of the work yourself, and we do know some people who do that, you probably already have contractors that do various things for the property. You would work through them at an arm's length. You're simply orchestrating the service of that property and the care of that property through your IRA. And some people who have experience with rental property are accustomed to putting their hands on the property. And so the difference here is that you have to have a completely hands-off arrangement with the property. That means, of course, no use of the property by yourself or your relatives, and you can't do any of the work on it. So the saying is, you can pick out the paint color, but you can't paint the house. And Carl Fisher, the owner, he said jokes about having to have his hands duct taped together, so when he walks into his property, he's resist the temptation to fix something that he sees is a little bit off. So, but again, a lot of landlords, I speak to a lot of landlord groups, and they're like, well, I'm just used to doing this. Yeah, but if you want to get to 50 or 100 doors, you're going to need a constellation of service providers around you. Why not
Mhm.
just work through them? And again, Carl tells a story of um, he was watching a piece of property, having his ears to the rail. He knew the neighborhood and the area really well. He knew that this property was going to come up for sale at some point, and he missed an opportunity to bid on it because he was busy saving himself 25 bucks an hour painting one of his other properties. And so, again, if you aspire to create a large portfolio, you want to get this done anyway. You're going to be doing it this way anyway. So
Yeah, exactly. I mean, self-management. I don't know. When I got into rental properties, I thought that if I got a good PM, like I would be okay. But man, like even then they need a lot of uh you still need to
Management.
manage them.
Yeah.
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 yeah,
Which to me defeats the purpose. But I mean, yeah. I mean, I guess this is kind of off topic, but yeah, scaling to 50 doors, I'd much rather have in-house property management, not me as an individual, but someone on my payroll, because they're going to manage it a lot better than some third party. But that's just my opinion.
yeah, it's a tree. And again, consult with your, because again, you have a company that does this, and you have
Mhm.
someone who does this, and engaging that company to provide services to a rental property inside your IRA might be perceived as self-dealing. So
Right.
yeah, it's just to consult your tax advisor, consult your accountant. Uh, That's our go-to whenever we don't have an answer for something, or whenever
It's
we
a
get
good
in on,
go-to.
whenever somebody gets us in over our heads with a question. That's what we tell them to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. We don't, we try to avoid people, we want to keep people out of the gray, because
Mm.
if you get into the gray, then that's where the IRS likes to participate with you, and you don't want to be in the gray with the IRS, because then they don't want to be in the gray either, so they're gonna make it
Yeah.
black and white really really fast. So
Yeah.
in general we say, hey, like, don't, is it really worth, not that you're saying you're trying to pull a fast one, but it's like
Mm.
you just want to be really, really certain that everything is exactly as it should be done, and you're not playing silly games that are gonna, cost you big
Right.
prizes.
Yeah, that's a great point, because
Yeah.
at least 3 times a week I get a question along the lines of, well, what if I structured it this way?
Mhm.
And how's anybody going to know that I'm using the vacation property 1 week out of the year? And how's anybody going to know about this? And what if I did it through a cutout? And don't get clever.
Yeah.
If you go to ancient Egypt, and you go to the pyramids, and they got the hieroglyphs all on the wall, and they've got carvings of people holding up baskets and animals, and they got a guy with a cat of nine tails. That's the tax collector, and it's the oldest or second oldest, um, um, you know, business in the world, in history. And so you're not going to be more clever than they are. So it's not. It simply isn't worth the risk.
Yeah, I was one of those people that's like, well, if I do this or that, like, can I then benefit? And then eventually it's like, all right, well, it's not really worth anybody's time. I'll just do simple stuff in my IRA and then just keep it moving.
Yep.
That's what my account is for.
Yeah.
She's by the book, and I say, well, what if I did it this way? She says you can't, and that's it.
So one of the questions I've had in the past is, Because of the way that the taxes are structured or the benefits are for IRAs versus 401ks, if you have an IRA and you open up a solo 401k or vice versa, are there any tax implications there?
No. I mean, you can have an IRA. I've got an IRA. I've got a traditional IRA, a Roth IRA. I've got a precious metals IRA. I've got a 401 solo 401k, and you can
Okay.
take advantage of all of the benefits associated with those. In fact, we recommend people who have side gigs or are getting into this for the first time to put a solo 401k on top of the business. As long as it's generating earned income, you can do that, and you can put as much as $70,000 into that solo K each year as a contribution. Again, as long as the business is generating earned income of at least that, you could put it all in there. And so for each little venture you've got going, you could put a self-employed pension plan, IRA, a simple IRA, or 401k on top of it. And that expands the range of contribution limits and allows you to sock away a lot more.
And
Gotcha.
if correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, but people, a solo 401k is a strategy to avoid UDFI. Is that correct?
Yes, UDFI and UBIT do not apply. So we have a lot of people that want to, they come in and they have $50,000 in an old 401k, a job they left years ago, and they bring it over and they want to buy a house. It's worth 200. You can go get financing with a non-recourse loan. You know, well, let's say you buy half of it with your IRA and you finance the other half. You start generating rental income. You'll pay taxes on half of the rental income because it's generated by borrowed money. So, um, and of course that will change as the principal balance goes down. But just kind of be aware of that. You can do that. The 401k, you
Interesting.
don't have that issue.
You also mentioned self-directed HSA. Is that, I mean, pretty much the same principle, just for a different type of account?
Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
Yeah. This is a health savings account to cover medical expenses not covered by high deductible health savings or health plans. And it's a great vehicle to put even more money away. Again, it's after tax income, so you don't get an attaboy or an attagirl for putting money in there the way you do with a traditional. And you're able to take those funds and deploy them in the same way you deploy any of your other funds in any of your other accounts. We have families. We have an organization that guides doctors through the exit from their practices and deployment of their profits into investments, and they've got their whole families participating in the same investments. So something similar to the HSA would be the ESA. It's an educational savings account, and you can put away money for any kind of education. Doesn't have to be college; it could be trade program for your kids, and make it grow while the kids are growing up, in the same way that you'd make investments in your IRAs and your 401ks.
Interesting. I've never heard of an ESA. Um, so I mean, right now I homeschool my kids. We take them out, and in the state of Florida where I live, they will give us money to take them to museums and all of that. Are museums admissions part of like an educational, like would the ESA pay for that? Can I use that?
I'm not sure about that particular thing, but the range of educationally related expenses that would be included is pretty broad. You're talking about textbooks and lodging and some other things there. So it's not
Hmm.
just strictly tuition. We can send as a follow-up, and you can share with your viewers some information about the ESA, and we have some stuff on our website and some other resources.
Okay. Yeah, because there's a large homeschool community where I live, so it would be super helpful for them as well.
Yeah.
All right, very cool. So, I guess one last question I have is what money is eligible? So if I like for me, I'm just working in W-2, I've switched jobs a couple times. I've taken that money out of my old retirement accounts. I've rolled into my current employer's plan. What money is eligible to be put into a self-directed retirement account?
So it's going to be this good question. So if you're no longer with, so if you have a retirement plan with an employer, you leave that employer, that money becomes eligible. So you can access it and you can roll it over into a standard IRA with, let's say you had a Schwab IRA, you could roll it over into that. Depending on what your existing account is and what your old retirement plan is, that might create a taxable event. So if you're going from a 401k into a Roth, you're going to get taxed on that money going in. Um, if you are over retirement age, so over 59 and a half, then you can access the funds that are in your retirement account, including moving some of that money into a self-directed account. And then you can obviously make uh, you can make new cash contributions to any account. The limit there is $7,000. Is that going to go up, Joe?
It generally goes up every year. Sometimes if in the era when inflation was very, very low, it stayed the same for a few years. But this year it's 7,000 plus. If you're 50 or older, you can add an extra 1,000 to the contribution.
Yeah, so you can put in, brand new cash at a max of $7,000 per year into those accounts. So, but those are generally kind of the sources of income are, or excuse me, the sources of money are the transfer going from like account to like account. So a Roth IRA at Schwab to a Roth IRA at CamaPlan, a rollover, a 401k into, for example, a Roth IRA at CamaPlan, or just contributing new money into that Roth IRA at CamaPlan. And you hear me saying Roth over and over again. We're partial to the Roths because
Oh, looks like Matt's camera froze a little bit. You
Yeah.
seeing the same thing, John?
you avoid
I
the tax man after you've made your riches, but it applies to all the. I can hear you, but I
Your
can't. But you're
yeah, your video's
frozen for
frozen.
me too. Oh, there you
yeah.
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 are.
Um,
Like I
I'm
said though
just
about the
while
monies.
yeah, while it's catching up, while Matt's camera's catching up with the show. Yeah, the difference and we didn't cover this before between the two categories of retirement accounts is the
mm,
traditional IRAs and related accounts are the government gives you an attaboy or an attagirl for putting money in. They give you a deduction, and so it's the equivalent of subsidizing seed, and you're going to plant the seed, you're going to water, you're going to pray for rain, you're going to deal with the blight, and you're going to harvest it, and the government's going to want its share of it when you start taking distributions out of those accounts. We like the Roth because you don't get an attaboy or an attagirl for putting money into it. You get to keep everything, and there's the day you turn 59 and a half, you could take it all and go buy an island somewhere. Peter Thiel, who was one of the PayPal's founders, took his PayPal shares and put them in his Roth, and he's got $1 billion in there, and he'll never pay capital gains tax on that. So, it's something to consider. We're big fans of the Roth. It's, um, you know, the thinking is that when you retired, you'd move into a lower tax bracket. So when you started
mm.
taking required distributions, that's another aspect. The traditional requires you to take distributions at age 73 and beyond. The Roth, there is no such thing. So the thinking is that you'd move into a lower tax bracket, you begin taking distributions, and you wouldn't be paying taxes at the rate you were when you were in your peak earning years. But I don't know about for a lot of people that just isn't working out, and taxes are never really, really ever going to go down. So getting into the Roth as early as possible is getting a real leg up on creating wealth for yourself and generational wealth.
Yeah, I remember seeing that he used something called Rob's Rollover Business Startup or something like that. That whole structure is still trying to figure that out. But that uses a Roth.
Yeah, yeah. The Robs is that we need to do another webinar on that. That's a whole subject in and of itself. So,
Yeah, I have a ton of questions about that because he's not the. I know that there are a lot of very wealthy people that take advantage of it, and to me, it just doesn't make any sense. Like it's still in there, but how do you spend it today money? So we'll definitely have to do an
yeah,
episode
we
on
have to
that.
do that. Yeah, yeah. Well, there's pros and cons to the Roth too. It's an endless bickering over when you should do it, why you should do it. I mean, for someone who's like myself, I'm a little older. The calculation is okay. I'm going to pay the tax if I convert my traditional to my Roth.
Mm,
How fast can I make up that tax payment?
right.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's always just playing with the numbers to see what makes sense for you.
sure.
Well, amazing. Thank you so much for the information. We'll definitely schedule a call about the Robs. And how can people reach out to you and start exploring the option of opening a self-directed?
Am I unfrozen now? Can you
Oh
see
yeah, you're
me?
good.
You're
Am I
good to
clear?
go.
All
Yeah,
right,
you're
You're all
cool.
good.
caught
Yeah,
up. You're
yeah,
all
cool.
caught up.
All right, perfect. Yeah, the best way to reach out to us is just to either go to you can email engage@camaplan.com, and just mention that you saw this podcast. You can also go onto our website and, fill out a contact us form there. But I'd say, emailing us or finding us on the website works. You can also call us at 215-283 2868. You're gonna quickly reach someone. Like I said, like Joe and I said, we like to answer the phone quickly. But yeah, I would say either call us 215-283-2868 or email us at engage@camaplan.com. And if it's just to ask questions and learn how any of this works, happy to do that. No pressure. And if you need to have someone else on the phone with you, like a CPA or a tax advisor, please invite them to join the call and we can answer all your questions.
Very cool. So I will make sure to have all that information in the description as well, just to make it easier for everyone.
Thank you.
Uh, Joe, Matt, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks, John, for having us. Appreciate
Yeah,
it.
great opportunity. Thank you very much.